So we've seen that the whole question of what the meaning of life is there this objective goal that all humans ought to strive for in life, really comes down to the more basic question of, is naturalism true? Or is naturalism false? And so Lewis wants to argue that naturalism is self-defeating. So in this segment, what I'd like to do is explain to you what it means to say that a certain claim is self-defeating. And I've given you such an example on the board. Now, obviously, many of you do not speak or understand Chinese. And so your question is, what does that mean? Well, this was actually something that my wife, who is a Chinese teacher, put on the t-shirts of a language camp that she runs every year, a summer language camp that is an intensive Middlebury style total immersion camp. And at the end of the camp, they all feel really accomplished, and they have a t-shirt that they wear. And one year, what was put on it was this. Now, what does this mean? 白人看不懂. It literally means white people don't understand this. Now, you should be laughing right now, because if you know anything about me from these lectures, is I'm white. But yet, if I'm right, that this is what it actually means, then the statement is false, isn't it? Because there's at least one white person who understands it. So this is an example of a claim that the minute I tell you what it means, it's false. Thus, it is self-defeating. Now, a self-defeating claim isn't necessarily a contradictory claim. If a Chinese person had told you what this meant, a non-white person, there's no contradiction here. What makes it self-defeating is coupled with the fact that I am the one uttering it, a white person who understands it. And so the minute I tell you accurately what it means, it is false. My wife and I, maybe many married couples do this, we always have this long-standing argument. The argument of who always loses the arguments in our relationship. I say, I can never win an argument against you, and she says the same thing. This is an argument that is self-defeating, because whoever wins the argument loses it. Let's say I win the argument, that I always lose the arguments. Then I've lost the argument, haven't I? Because now there's an argument that I've won, and therefore my claim that I always lose the arguments is false. Let's say she wins the argument, that she always loses the argument. The same thing happens. It is self-defeating. Another example is the famous liar paradox. Many of you may have watched Family Guy in the past, one of my favorite shows, one of my guilty pleasures. And there's the one episode where Gumble and Gumble, the TV show that Peter and his son Chris like to watch, gets canceled. And so Peter comes up with this cockamamie scheme to make an appeal to the Make-Your-Wish Foundation to re-air the show by faking Chris having a fatal disease, by taping pepperoni to his face. Well, at the end of the episode, Chris finds out that he doesn't have this fatal disease, that in fact his dad had lied to him. And Peter's response is, son, I always lie to you. But then he realizes something. If he always lies to Chris, then the very statement that he's making is a lie, which means he doesn't always lie to him. And so he says, except for that statement, and that one, and that one. It never ends, because the claim that I always lie to you, if true, must be false. Because then I'm claiming that I'm telling the truth in at least one statement, but also claiming contradictorily that I never tell the truth. So Lewis's claim is that the statement of naturalism, the naturalist's position, the minute we accept it, will lead to the falsehood of the position when coupled with the agreed upon fact that both the naturalist and the supernaturalist both advocate. What is that fact? The fact that we have knowledge. The naturalist indeed comes to their naturalism as a result of what they believe is scientific evidence. You might say naturalism arises out of the rise of science and its development, and therefore your modern naturalist is a scientific naturalist. That is someone who claims that science itself, knowledge itself, developed through the scientific method, lends us better reason to believe that there is nothing besides nature. Remember our statement from Carl Sagan, nature or the cosmos is all there ever was, all there is, and all there ever will be. His claim isn't dogmatic, he says, because he says it's grounded by the evidence. So, therefore, both the naturalist and the supernaturalist agree on one thing. We have knowledge. Lewis says the minute you agree upon that, Mr. Naturalist, Mrs. Naturalist, then you also are going to have to agree that naturalism leads to the denial of all knowledge whatsoever. Therefore, naturalism and the fact that we have knowledge are self-contradictory. Naturalism is self-defeating. In our next segment, we'll lay out the outline of the main argument for this. And then in a segment after that, we'll get into the details.